SteelSeries has refreshed their headset lineup once again. Their newest headsets are the Arctis Nova 1, Arctis Nova 3, Arctis Nova 7, and Arctis Nova Pro. Now there are some console branded variants of these devices like the Arctis Nova 7X and also the Nova Pro. Comes in both wired and wireless. I bought the wired version, but I've already reviewed the Nova Pro in a different video. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on these three, and to keep the name shorter, I'm just going to refer to them as the Nova 1, Nova 3, and Nova 7. The Arctis Nova 1 replaces the older SteelSeries Arctis 1. Just as a quick design comparison, this is the older Arctis 1 and the Arctis Nova 1 right here. Now the Nova 1 connects wired only 3.5mm cable. It is detachable. It comes with a splitter. It also has this little sticker to show which direction goes into the headset itself. I'm not sure if this is actually the correct splitter. I have so many splitters now, I kind of get them mixed up, but it does come with a splitter in the box anyway. Now the mic on this thing is fully retractable. And the controls, left ear cup, you have mic mute, it's a switch, orange is mute, and then not orange, not muted. And then there's a volume wheel, which has a finite scroll, so it's not gonna control system volume or anything, just the headphone gain itself. Now next we have the Arctis Nova 3, and this replaces the Arctis 5, the previous model 2019, and it replaces the Arctis 3, but really the 3 and the 5 were like the same thing. It's just the 5 had a lot more features and slightly different tuning, but pretty much the same device. Just this was mostly for PC, and this is actually literally the console version of this device. Now the Nova 3 is again wired only, just like the Arctis 5 and the Arctis 3. And you can use any of the included cables to connect it. It has USB-C to C, USB-C to A, and USB-C to 3.5mm. And I'm using USB-C to A right now. It's different than the Arctis 5, which used this weird proprietary cable, and it has like a game chat mixer, like physical knob. And the Arctis 5 also had a 3.5mm port by itself, which you can't, there's none on the Nova 3. The strange thing about this port on the Arctis 5 though was that there was actually no 3.5 cable in the box, so you pretty much had to use some sort of USB connection out the box, and you had to get a third-party cable. Now what these devices do have in common, as you can see, is RGB support that can be adjusted in SteelSeries engine. Now as for the controls on this thing, starting off we have the headphone gain again, finite scroll, not going to change the system volume, and then mic mute. This will actually turn a red light on. You can customize how bright that is or turn it all the way off in the software, and you can save that setting. And that's all the controls you have on the left ear cup. The right ear cup, there's actually a switch to turn the RGB on or off. So if you're not really feeling that, you can turn it off. And I also like how inside you see the L and the R inside the Nova 3 and the Nova 1. Now the Arctis Nova 7 replaces the Arctis 7. This is actually the Arctis 7 Plus, and also replaces the Arctis 9. These were pretty similar devices, but the Arctis 9 has Bluetooth and wireless, and the 7 Plus is just wireless with the dongle. Now the Nova 7 is primarily a wireless device, but you can also use it with a 3.5mm cable if you want. Now the wireless on this has both 2.4 gigahertz and it has Bluetooth, and you can see that little Bluetooth logo right there. And you can use this with the 2.4 gigahertz connection with the dongle and Bluetooth simultaneously, just like the Arctis 9. There's a USB-C charging port on the bottom. You can't actually send any audio through there, but you do need this to update the firmware. And awesome news, the 3.5mm cable can be used when this is completely powered off. Now the dual wireless connection works very well. There is one issue with the mic that I'll talk about in a little bit, but the way they separated them was a little bit strange. I think it was to compensate for one of the shortcomings with the Arctis 9. Now, I haven't actually made a video about the Arctis 9 on my YouTube channel. I have an article on my website where I talk about this, but basically, if you have the wireless dongle plugged into a PC or PlayStation or whatever console you have, and you go out of range, it's gonna make that beepy sound, that doo-doo, or whatever the sound is, to disconnect and then keep trying to reconnect, and it's really annoying and interrupts your music or whatever. Now, if you're only using the 2.4, then I guess it doesn't matter because it's just letting you know that your connection is not working. But if you're using Bluetooth, and let's say you don't even want any audio from the dongle, your dongle just is left in your PC, no audio is playing from it, if you're out, like, you know, you go like outside in the backyard or on a treadmill, or you go to work out or you go upstairs or whatever, you keep hearing that interrupting your Bluetooth audio, even though you don't even want the 2.4 gigahertz connection to be working at all, but it's going to keep on trying to reconnect anyway. Now, what the Nova 7 does to combat this is you actually power this device on separately than the Bluetooth. So I can show you Bluetooth. I'll turn this on right now and it'll start blinking. So it's like, oh, the device isn't even powered on, right? It's just Bluetooth. It's very interesting because you can also press the power button and then it will turn on right there. And then you can see that. Now this is cool because it lets you turn on and off the 2.4 gigahertz connection and Bluetooth individually. So I could turn the Bluetooth off only right here, and it'll still have the green light flashing for the 2.4. Now the problem with this is, if you don't know, you might think that you turned your headset off. So I actually had Bluetooth going and I turned the green off and I was like, okay, the device is off, but it was still on. I accidentally left it on all night because the Bluetooth was still trying to connect the entire time. The Bluetooth was still on. So you do have to keep in mind that you need to turn both of them off. And that actually leads me into the battery life. It's listed at up to 38 hours of battery life if you only have one of the connections. I believe it's the 2.4 gigahertz wireless, 38 hours up to, and then you get up to 26 hours if you have both the 2.4 gigahertz and the Bluetooth together. And this charges up to 6 hours of power in just 15 minutes. In my testing, that was about accurate. I had this on like yellow and I charged it up all the way to green, like really fast, just so that I could do some testing as fast as I could, because I really was excited to get into this thing. And even leaving it up all night, it was still green. So battery life much improved from the Arctis 7, which only had, I believe, 20 hours of battery life, and even the 7 Plus, I'm pretty sure this has 30 hours of battery life listed. So that's pretty sick. And just like the other devices, the Arctis Nova 3, I didn't even show this on the Nova 3, but this has a fully retractable mic as well. But the Nova 7 has a fully retractable mic, and the controls left ear cup got mic mute switch, same as before. From the previous device, I actually turned the light off because, you know, if you're taking this out, you don't want that red light on every time it's muted. Volume wheel, same as the other Nova devices. Finite scroll doesn't control the system volume. It's just the headset itself. Right ear cup, we have the game chat volume mixer. Now this is something that you're really going to need sonar to actually control. Basically, you can set one of your programs to game or another one to chat, and then you could just make it louder or quieter depending. I talked about this several times and even in the SteelSeries sonar review, but does not work on console. PlayStation got rid of that functionality for everything that's not a Sony branded headset. And then of course there's the power button, turn it on, turn it off. And this is for the 2.4 connection. And then the Bluetooth, then turn this on, turn it off. And then you can also tap once to like answer calls or play a track, double tap to skip, triple tap to go back, just like those standard controls from like, you know, a decade ago. So this is really SteelSeries' answer to an all-in-one device. If you wanted to take something out on the go, if you wanted to use this with any of your different consoles, if you want to use it like your PS4, your PS5, and your laptop, and then you also want to use it like on your phone, you know, whatever. You just have all these different options with the dongle, with the Bluetooth, and the 2.4 gigahertz connection. You can even use it 3.5. Now let's talk about headphone audio quality. I'm very familiar with SteelSeries sound, and as you've seen, I own 10 different SteelSeries headsets already. Their sound signature has always been bright, emphasize upper mids, sharp highs, and quite weak in the lower mids, the bass, and sub bass. Now what SteelSeries did in their Arctis Nova lineup, including the Arctis Nova Pro, is double down on their sound signature. Out the box, each of these three devices is even more top heavy than the previous headsets in the Arctis lineup. Talking the Arctis 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And I respect that because they know what their fan base likes. If they totally changed up the EQ curve, it would probably alienate a lot of SteelSeries fans. That'd be kind of like telling Skull Candy, hey, you guys have too much bass, could you tone it down? Yeah, you might get a few new customers, but most of the previous fans, they're gonna bounce. Now the Nova 1 isn't that bad on a first listen. It's a slight improvement over the Arctis 1. It doesn't sound as tinny and overly airy with the unnaturally elevated mids on the older model, and the details in the lower frequencies are better. But overall, it's still kind of hollow and there's not that level of fullness to each instrument like the Nova 3 or Nova 7. It's always like certain sounds aren't being fully represented. When there are long lingering notes from singers, it's not very smooth and it sounds like there's random dips in the EQ curve that shouldn't be there. That said, I didn't feel like I was missing any critical information in games, but now let me explain why the Nova 3 and Nova 7 are a lot better. The first thing I noticed when switching to the Nova 3 was the improved detail. In Resident Evil 7, there are a lot of areas with this slimy mold that you can hear all around you. It's a big part of what adds to the ambience of that game. It can get kind of lost in the Nova 1 and other devices with mediocre sound separation, but you're really being bombarded by that sound like it's creeping all around you in the Nova 3, as it should be. Now the EQ is a bit more balanced in the Nova 3, but it's still focused on strong highs, weak bass. What I like about the Nova 3 over the Arctis 5 is the faster transient response. Now, what do I mean by that? You might hear self-proclaimed audiophiles talk about a headset or headphones are fast, and it's basically this. A percussive sound is produced by two objects hitting each other. So something like that. It could be a drum, it could be footsteps. The sound starts, and then depending on what headphones or speakers you're listening to, it either starts and stops really quickly or it just kind of lingers around. With the Nova 3, each drum hit ends really fast. So when there's a lot of them in succession, they don't get muddied together. One of the best songs that you can listen to experience this is Satellite Mind from Metric. Obviously it's copyrighted, so I can't play an example here, but the instrumental is really cool. There's this and each one's kind of like a quick pop on this, which I really like. And that fast transient response is something that I enjoy in the Nova 3. It makes the bass feel tighter, if you will. I didn't really know the term for that when I was using the Odyssey Penrose, which is why the bass feels so clean on that thing. And that's what it is. Now, honestly, I'm okay with the slower decay with the bass kind of hanging around a little bit more, kind of like in like this is the Astro A50, where bass kind of like booms a little bit more and longer, but only if the bass is actually good. On SteelSeries devices, since they're all so bright, then the faster that response, the better. Like the Arctis 5, it's not even pretending to have powerful bass. So if you're gonna have something this bright, then having really tight bass is an advantage in my opinion. Now the Nova 7 has the hardest hitting bass of the three. When I say hard, I guess I mean as hard as getting hit by a ball of cotton. Now, I'm not sure that they actually intended the Nova 7 to have any different tuning than the Nova 3, but in my experience with some bass heavy music, there was indeed more impact on the 7. And this was taking EQ into account. In fact, I actually boosted this by 6 decibels because over 6, this was in the bass range, anything over 6, it was gonna start to distort. And so I tried to keep it 6 or under. 7, once I hit 7, I was like, okay, we're getting some blaring action here. But I really want to see what this and the Nova 3 were packing. So, I put them to their limits. And even though all 3 of these devices have the same stated frequency range of 20 hertz to 22 kilohertz, it sounded to me like there was a little bit less of a drop off in the sub bass with the Nova 7. So the range actually ended up sounding more stretched out to me, which is a good thing. So by that, I mean the lows, the sub bass could actually be felt just a little bit, not just heard, but the overall tone wasn't changed, didn't like leak into the other frequencies, and the highest treble sounds still had good detail. With the Nova 3, the sub bass drops off a bit faster, so you're hearing almost exclusively highs and mids.
I'm an old man, son. You can't take on an old man?
Now, when it comes to FPS games or really anything where you only care about just hearing information, you don't care about like it being pleasant to listen to, you just want like footsteps and comms, like that's it, that's all you really care about, then both the Nova 3 and the Nova 7 are great options. And they're even better than the previous Arctis 3, 5, 7, and 9 because the bass is a little bit tighter. It's not quite as muddy. I'm not saying that the other ones had like powerful or boomy bass, it just wasn't as tight and clean as these. Now the Nova 1, it does get the job done too. I played some games with the Nova 1 also, but some sounds might not be as noticeable as they should be in very chaotic environments. Ultimately, the Nova 7 sounds the best, but it's only slightly over the Nova 3 just because the bass is a little bit better on the Nova 7. And I'd probably pass on the Nova 1 just because for the price that it launched at, you can find stuff that's just straight up better, which I'll get into in a second. So that's how all of these headsets sound, and I compared them pretty much just in a vacuum. Nova 1, Nova 3, Nova 7, and then the Arctis 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. But if I'm really going to help you make an informed buying decision, then I've got to compare them to other headsets that are on the market, because at this point, I believe I have 35 different ones. So this leads me into the difficult value proposition with the Nova 1, Nova 3, and Nova 7. The Nova 1 launched for $60, the Nova 3 for $100, and the Nova 7 launched for $180, and I bought these all at their launch prices. So here's the problem. If you already have a SteelSeries Arctis headset and you like the way it sounds, you love SteelSeries, I don't think the differences between the previous headsets and this lineup is pronounced enough to go out and spend like $100 extra on the Nova 3 if you already have the Arctis 5, because these are really minor upgrades when it comes to sound, in my opinion. And on the other hand, if you're not already loyal to SteelSeries, then the HyperX Cloud lineup might be worth looking into. This is the Cloud Alpha. I like the Cloud Alpha sound definitively over all three of these headsets. The bass is fuller and the drivers can take a ton of equalization without distortion. Also, because the lower mid-range isn't so kneecapped on the Cloud Alpha, the overall tone of the sound is a lot more natural on this device when compared to the Arctis Nova lineup. That also makes it easier to track any individual sound when there's a very chaotic environment, whether it's in the sub bass or the mids or the highs. There's such a defined separation between them that sounds don't get really like lost. If there's bass, if there's rumbling, you feel it. You don't have to like really like listen out for it. It's physical. But at the same time, the highs are still sharp and they're still crisp, but everything's not quite as crammed together as they are in the Arctis Nova lineup. With these headsets, you're mostly getting hammered with the highs and the mids, which for some people, they love that. And if you do, then you're gonna love these. Now, bringing up the Cloud 2 is actually pretty interesting, because I think SteelSeries has finally passed up the Cloud 2. When it comes to the treble, I think that it's a lot cleaner in the Arctis Nova 3 and the Nova 7, because this, it can get loud, but it loses a little bit of the detail and the clarity up there. It's just loud in the treble. And the overall sound signature is brighter than the Alpha. This is still an amazing device for listening to footsteps, because it can produce that 200 hertz range where the footsteps like originate, and then all the different harmonics all the way up to like, 4K. It makes those pretty high pitched and makes them stand out. But personally, I do find the highs to be cleaner in the Nova 7 and the Nova 3. So yeah, personally, I'd still go for these when it comes to like Call of Duty or FPS games, but I know a ton of people love the sound signature that SteelSeries has, so I'm not gonna hate on it. Now, what about the Arctis Nova Pro, the flagship of the Arctis Nova lineup? Well, like I said in my review of this device, I do find it to be quite overpriced, especially the wireless version, but it does sound better than the Nova 1, Nova 3, and Nova 7. The Nova Pro is still super bright, but it can produce a little bit more impact in the bass, even more than the Nova 7. So you'd feel a little baby pulse here, a little poof, poof, little puff when there's a little bit of percussion, when anything is like hitting against something else. It's not gonna give you a boom or a rumble, but there's a little something there. And the treble has very good sound separation. The upper mids are smooth, there's minimal distortion, and the Nova Pro can take 12 dB boosts in the bass or upper mids, treble, wherever you want with no distortion, at least that I could detect. This actually got some pretty impressive drivers when it comes to equalization. Now, the pleather ear cushions, they block out a little bit more sound, trap things in a little bit, and probably is what's contributing to the percussive sounds hitting just a little bit harder than the Arctis Nova 7. Again, I still think that this is overpriced, but I do find it to be better than the other devices, which makes sense because, well, it's the most expensive. All right, microphone audio quality, starting with the Arctis Nova 1. Now, not a lot has changed since the last generation of Arctis headsets. The Nova 1 does not get as loud as the Nova 3. It's hitting around like minus 25 decibels or so just by me talking, and the Nova 3 was able to get up to about like negative 10 because it has that USB connection. Now let me switch over to the Nova 3 so that you can hear the differences in the EQ. Now the Nova 1 is a lot warmer sounding than the Nova 3. The Nova 3 is a lot more sibilant in those S sounds, and any sort of mouth movements, they're going to be picked up. but the detail on both is about the same, so you're not really getting an advantage one way or the other. Just when it comes to EQ, you can alter them in Sonar, and of course if you're playing on console, you're not really going to be able to do a whole lot about that. I'm not going to demonstrate altering the EQ in this video, but in my SteelSeries Sonar review, I do have an example of changing up the EQ on the Arctis 5, and you can do a similar thing to these headsets. Now I tested the Nova 7 using the 2.4 gigahertz USB-C dongle, which I'm using right now, and the quality was a lot worse than the other two devices, which makes sense because it's wireless. But then again, of all the headsets that I have, the best mic actually is the Corsair HS80, and that's wireless as well. Anyway, the Nova 7 sounds quite muffled, and during my tests it did cut out quite a bit. Then I have to listen to this sample back to hear if it's cutting out at all. The audio, like the headphone audio, has not cut out the whole time I've used it, Bluetooth or 2.4 gigahertz while I was playing games, all that stuff. But the mic, it just seems to keep on cutting out and like spiking. But it's not actually peaking. It's not actually getting close to 0 decibels at like in the OBS meter. But yeah, it's cutting out quite a bit. Not sure why. So equalization in Sonar is not going to be able to save this mic like it can the other two, the Nova 1 and the Nova 3. But if you're already at a PC, then you can of course get a dedicated cheap mic, USB mic. It's going to sound way better than this, even like a $30 condenser. Now, something that I found strange is that neither of these mics really seem to have any background noise rejection. Actually, let me go ahead and do a keyboard typing test with the Arctis Nova 1 right now. So while I do this, I'll just be talking about how on the box they talk about how there's like ClearCast noise cancellation that's built into the mic Gen 2. That's the Nova 1. And now we're on the Nova 3. And they talk about how it's a bidirectional microphone. So both of those confuse me. First of all, why is it a bidirectional microphone if it's supposed to be rejecting background noise? Because you're going to be hearing me talking in one side and then hearing background noise on the other side. So wouldn't you want it to be unidirectional? Nova 7 here. And they talk about the ClearCast Gen 2 mic on all three of the boxes as if the mic itself has the noise cancellation technology. And well, as you guys can hear or not hear, it's not really doing a whole lot. Fortunately, in the SteelSeries Sonar software, the ClearCast AI noise cancellation software is ridiculously good, but somebody did bring it to my attention. I don't know which headsets actually unlock that. Apparently, if you don't have a SteelSeries device at all, it's stuck in early access and you can't actually click it to enable it at all. I would assume that these would activate it, but I have so many different SteelSeries devices, the Nova Pro and all these other Arctis devices, I don't know which one actually allowed me to do that. But yeah, that software, talked about it a bunch. It's really good. I'm actually using it for my main microphone, the Shure MV7 right now, the EQ and the AI noise cancellation to get rid of all the fan noise, AC noise from outside my room, all that stuff. No filters on the headset mics though. I just want to get these raw. Now speaking to the Arctis 5 now to give a bit of context, the Nova 1 and Nova 3, they're both above average microphones for headsets. That's actually the same thing that I said about the Arctis 5 way back when I reviewed it. I give the edge to the Nova 3 over the Nova 1 just because it can get a little bit louder, probably due to that USB connection. It is more sibilant, but both of those you can EQ if you're on PC. I find that both the Nova 1 and Nova 3 are about on par with this, which is the Arctis 5, came out in 2019. They all have similar quality overall. I just find that the EQs on all of them a little bit different. And as for the Nova 7, well, if you're looking into it, just don't get it for the mic. The SteelSeries engine software is pretty basic. Both the Arctis Nova 3 and Nova 7 get access to it. In addition to all these other SteelSeries devices, you get to switch up the EQ and a few other settings with it. If you want a deep dive on the more advanced software Sonar, then I have a full video on that. So starting with the Nova 3, you get a 6-band EQ here, and I personally wouldn't touch this for a few reasons. First off, you have Sonar just a click away. It's a bit annoying to set up and it's a little intrusive, but great software. I'm using it right now. And inside Sonar, there's actually a 10-band EQ. Now, this doesn't have all 10 on it right now. Let's see if I put it on a different EQ. Let's see right here, I can throw in as many as I want, up to 10. And then drag them all individually, and it's a parametric EQ. The Nova 3 only goes up and down by 6 decibels, and Sonar, it goes up and down by up to 12. But the biggest issue that I have with this EQ at all really is when you're dragging these up and down, then you'll hear a little bit of a static sound as you're moving them in the headset. But yeah, it's annoying to try to tweak to get the preferred EQ when you keep hearing and popping like constantly. Now, the benefit to using the equalizer in the engine over Sonar is these settings can actually save to the device itself. All the settings, the mic volume, mic side tone, the mic muted brightness, and even all the illumination settings, you can save these right to the device itself. So when you use this like on another console or even your phone, it saves all of those settings to this, so you can use that same EQ anywhere. In the illumination tab, you can see to set different effects, and I'll just maybe show like one. Let's see. Yeah, you see that little pulse going on. It's like kind of cool, I guess. I don't know. It's like I just keep it on color shift, and like it's, if you're into RGB, it's kind of cool, but and you can set multiple different configurations for multiple presets. So even though you can only have one custom EQ here, there's also these presets that they have in here. I always like to make my own. But if you make your own, let's say you wanted to like boost the bass or something like that, but you wanted something else where you had something specific, you could save it to a different configuration if you want. Now with the Nova 7, it's pretty much the same thing here, but you get a full 10 band EQ here, and you can go up and down by 10 decibels. Now I can kind of see why there was a precaution to only let you go up and down by 6 in the Nova 3, because again, if you go up past 6 on the like any of the bass frequencies, this thing is going to start to distort. And this had the same issue that I had when moving the frequencies while hearing sound. It would have that kind of static feedback. There's also a limiter in this one. One of the main differences really is just that the settings, you get Bluetooth settings instead of some RGB stuff, but mostly the same software. And once again, these settings will save to the dongle itself, but do keep in mind that this doesn't actually affect Bluetooth audio. Now, in terms of the comfort and build, all three of these devices, the Nova 1, Nova 3, and Nova 7, are significant improvements over the previous Arctis lineup. And all three have similar designs as well, and I'll talk about those. So starting with the Arctis Nova 1. Now, first I need to show off this Arctis 1. Something that this device has, very interesting. These adjustment brackets go up and down, and then they got some swivel on the ear cup. And at the top, you've got some padding, and this is like a little thin strip of metal here. Now this is pretty standard, a lot of headsets are like this, but with the last lineup of Arctis headsets, besides the one, if we're talking about the 3, 5, 7, 9, they all follow this design, which this is the Arctis 5. Now, no adjustment brackets, they do have swivel, but if you wanted to bring it down because your head was too long, then there's no choice, you just have to sit and suffer. And these have a ski goggle headband. This is the Arctis 5 again, and you would unstrap this Velcro, and then you can adjust it to be tighter or looser, but there's not actually padding here, it's just resistance, so it makes a pressure point on your head when you have it on for a long time. Let me go ahead and take this beanie off. And yeah, just you don't feel it when you first have it on, but it is pressure, especially if your head is a little bit longer and you just can't get it quite all the way on. It's going to be like smashing down. But fortunately, this time around, all three of these devices have adjustment brackets. Got it on the Arctis Nova 1, the Nova 3, and Nova 7. Now they continue to use a unique headband design, but this one is a little bit different. So let's see if you can see here. There's like some holes on this kind of band right here. And then you can like put them in here, these little notches, so that you can make it tighter or looser. You just put them in like this. Make it tighter or looser, depending on how you wanted it. This band itself, it's gonna really control the clamping force, but this is gonna be more of the length. So they work in tandem with each other. You got some length, and then you have clamping force. You want it looser or tighter. Now, something about the Nova 1 is that the headband itself, not the part that's like kind of soft, but like the actual headband frame, it's a little bit hard to see in a comparison here, holding them right next to each other. You kind of got to see it in like a full like 3D, like in person. But the Nova 1, the frame of the headband is a little bit shorter than the Nova 3 and the Nova 7. And what that means is that even if you have it at its loosest, it's going to clamp a little bit harder than the other two, which I find a little bit uncomfortable. Actually, spoiler, I find all of these a bit uncomfortable, but yeah, that one definitely problematic for me. Now, these all use the same kind of porous type of plastic. It's like supposed to be like some sort of cloth. It's the same thing that they've been using for a while. This is the Arctis 5. Even the older Arctis 1 had the same thing. So similar, if you're used to it, if you like it, then you're going to love these because it's the same thing. They're not really a lot of padding in here, not really that soft. And over time, because of the combination of how it clamps, especially if you have the smaller headband like of the Nova 1, you're kind of going to feel the plastic more than you're going to feel like a cushion or a pillow like you would on like the Cloud 2 or something like this. This is the Astro A50 and it's a lot softer of a material. Some people don't like it, but there is a key advantage to this type of material. This is the Nova 7, is because it's so porous, it doesn't trap in heat. So your ears don't really get too hot when using these. So partially for that reason, a lot of people find these very comfortable. Now the downsides for me is, well, I do find them pretty scratchy. Don't really like this material, especially rubbing against my hair. Kind of feels and sounds like cardboard rubbing together. If you're sensitive to that sound, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Or styrofoam, that kind of like, yeah, not for me. But this padding, since it is so porous, it doesn't have really any noise isolation. Sound leaks in and out. So if you have this on, you're pretty much going to hear everything clearly. You don't even really need mic monitoring with this thing because you're just going to hear your voice as if you normally would, just a little bit quieter. And that means the bass isn't going to like reverb as much inside of the ear cups, good or bad depending on your preference. But because it is still closed back, it doesn't really give you a wider sound stage. Some people care about that. I really don't. But the thing is, because it doesn't, it's not really a trade-off. Oh, well, you get a more open sound stage and you get some sound leakage. It's more like, well, you get sound leakage and it's a narrow sound stage. So no trade-off really there. It just sounds coming out, sounds getting in. Now, most relevant to the Nova 7 is how these actually fit on your head. There's not really, like I said, that it doesn't block out sound, but there's still not that good of a seal. It's not like super snug to your head. I used the Razer Barracuda Pro. That has an amazing fit, amazing snugness. It's definitely the most comfortable headset that I've used, and it blocks out sound passively quite well. But when you're exercising with that thing, it really just like locks on and latches onto your head. This, it's just kind of loose. So I was on the treadmill and it was just kind of like moving around. I had to keep on readjusting it because this headband, it kind of moves. Like if you're moving, it moves. It doesn't like stay like in one like spot, because it's not just like, you know, padding like up at the top, it's moving. Now, as for the actual headband frame, I should point out, it's very important that the Nova 1 is all plastic. This whole body is plastic. The Nova 3, also all plastic. It has more stretch. Both of these have more stretch than the previous Arctis devices. So this was the 5 and it was a little bit harder actually and thicker, but it was brittle. It felt like it was gonna snap, and a lot of people have had theirs snap. Now, the Nova 7, this one has a thin strip of metal at the top, in addition to being plastic for most of it. The hinge is still plastic, so this is a volatility point, so that would have been sick if they actually made this metal, but I guess that's okay. The headband has some good flex, and it has some metal. I don't know what kind of metal, and it kind of feels like an alloy, but like it's not as hard as the one where they had with the 7 Plus. This is like some hard, solid metal. And it has a good flex to it, but like when you touch it, it's like, oh man, that's actually kind of hard. So yeah, build quality, pretty good on them. But if you want one that, you know, you could feel a little bit more comfortable with not breaking, I'd say the Nova 7. But none of these really should have issues if you're just using them normal use. A great advantage of the new devices. So check out this. This is the Arctis 5. It had a mic that would retract, but it was leave this little nub out. So it was like kind of, it looks whack. All of these, their mics, like I demonstrated before, can be retracted all the way in. It doesn't even look like it comes out. So it's pretty awesome. I like how they did that. All right, verdict time of these 3 devices, the Nova 1, Nova 3, and Nova 7. I find the Nova 7 to be the best device. It only sounds slightly better than the Nova 3, but it also has the advantage of being wireless, both Bluetooth and 2.4 GHz simultaneous. And all three of these are an improvement in headphone audio quality over the previous Arctis devices. Just keep in mind that if you're using this wireless, the Nova 7, which is why you buy it, that the mic's not going to sound that good wireless. Well, just straight up bad, honestly. So which one do I recommend? Well, it's kind of simple, to be honest. The Nova 3, if you're fine with the wire and it's not going to be too cumbersome. And then the Nova 7, if you're going to be using it for different use cases, if you want to take it outside or you want to go different consoles, stuff like that. But I would probably skip the Nova 1. I just don't think, even if you like really like SteelSeries, for the price that it launched at, I think there's just too many other devices that are just straight up better, like the HyperX Cloud Core. It might even be better to save up for the older Arctis 5 if you can find it on sale. So that's for SteelSeries fans. I think you'll love the Nova 3 and you'll love the 7 except the mic. But if you're not already committed to SteelSeries, then none of these crack my top 5. Doesn't change my list at all. Still top 5 is the Odyssey Penrose, and there's different sound signatures. I have an entire video for my best headsets. Odyssey Penrose number 1 did have some issues with that device, made some videos on that. Number 2, my main right now, and will be until I can find something that's like definitively better, Dropless Epos PC38X. Then the Nova Pro, I have this at 3rd. Again, this isn't even my preferred sound signature, but I think the quality is quite good. Then the Astra A40 TR without the mix amp, and then the HyperX Cloud 2 and Cloud Alpha tied at 5th. Links to all 3 of these headsets and the Nova Pro are below.